Welcome to this episode of Life Science Success. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don, and I'm a consultant in life sciences, and I help companies with operational excellence. And so focus a lot on, right now, value stream mapping seems to be like one of the key topics. And so you'll see an upcoming Thoughts at Scale that comes up with, for us to focus in on value stream mapping as well, so that people can get a better understanding of how that can impact organizations. So with that, today in this episode of Life Science Success, let me bring in my guest. So Andrea Henderson is, she is the chair of the membership committee for the Atlanta chapter of Private Directors Association. She's also somebody who focuses in on executive talent solutions for DHR Global. And so with that, welcome, Andrea.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here, and this has been on my schedule for a little while. It's great to have you be a part of the podcast. Would you mind telling the listeners just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm going to start way back. I originally wanted to be a diplomat. So I got my bachelor's and my master's in international affairs. Right after graduating undergrad, I spent some time in West Africa building a school for a program that the Peace Corps was modeled after, actually. And then I went back and got my master's degree and wrote my master's thesis in Sri Lanka. Came back, went into consulting around international labor relations issues, and ended up in international human resources, of all things. Talk about the randomness.
Right.
um, and after spending a few years in corporate America, during a time that there was a lot of M&A activity going on, I said, you know what? I've studied the public sector, but I haven't studied the private sector. So I need to really understand what's happening. And I went back to business school, got an MBA, and came back out and ended up in executive search. There's a lot that happened in between there, but I won't bore you with those details. And spent the rest of my career, and not that it's over, but up until this point, um, solving talent problems, identifying talent, managing talent and talent management function, succession planning, high potential development, all of that. And so now I really utilize a lot of that experience in my current role with DHR Global.
Yeah, and it's always interesting overall to hear people's, journey to what brought them to this point in their career. I guess what made you want to make that transition, more towards, executive search and just really be a part of this environment in terms of really focusing in on the talent that companies need?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I've always seen myself as a diplomat. Now I'm a corporate diplomat. Um, I'm an ambassador for the companies that I represent. Um, I I think even though I really sort of fell into human resources, but with that first consulting role early in my career, I felt that the talent problems are really some of the biggest problems that any organization has. They're quite often the largest expense on any organization's balance sheet, and probably where you can extract the most value.
Mm.
Because a dollar, even if you get excellent ROI, it's not unlimited, right? Return. But I do believe there's unlimited potential in people. So while it isn't really a linear path, um, it evolved organically. It makes sense to me.
Hmm. Yeah, it is. I mean, it is one of those things that, I mean, I feel like for so many people, um, you start out with one idea in mind in terms of where you want to wind up, and then your journey, in your career path, takes you to lots of different places. I know for a long time, it's consulting was something that I wanted to do. But there was just that sort of risk factor that you have to figure in as well. And there are many different forces that I feel like, are continually pulling me back towards the corporate world. And who knows what'll happen in the future. So, I'm somebody who's in a similar place where I just say, hey, look, I still don't know exactly what the end state of my career will be either.
Absolutely, and I think the best careers sort of evolve. You stay agile, and if you're a problem solver like me, you solve the problems that appear to you,
Mm,
and you can have a really good, fulfilling career by solving the problems that arise that are important to you that you feel are impactful, regardless of what that title is, or if you're getting a check or a 1099.
right. And I feel like many times our career, paths, as they twist and turn, they sort of, bring to light different things. And so I guess, could you tell us a little bit more about, what were some of those pivotal moments inside of your career path where you said, hey, these are things that I'm going to take along with me as I go along?
Another great question. Um, I feel like there was a a pivotal point when I was in West Africa, in the Gambia, working on the development project, and I caught malaria.
Oh
Um,
my.
and I was so sick, I really felt like I was going to die. And I was alone in a place where not everyone spoke the same language as me, and there were people that I had only known several weeks that my life depended on, and so that kind of made me think really hard about where I wanted to be geographically, and what types of situations I wanted to put myself in.
Mm.
I think there were a few other pivot points that were economic. So a few recessions, let's call them, where it was very challenging to get employment. And then one where it was very challenging to remain an entrepreneur when I had my own search firm in 2008, a really challenging environment. So those were pivotal moments that sort of impacted the trajectory of my career. And then I had the opportunity to work on several drug launches with Genentech. Ocrelizumab being one of the um, most notable, and the commercial name is Ocrevus, which is a drug for multiple sclerosis. Um, and really just being able to see that from you know approval through commercial launch, um, working on the succession plan for Novartis's president of Pharmaceuticals North America, and understanding what an opportunity that was, and really thinking strategically about that. And I would say most recently, working with early stage companies and helping them solve their talent issues um, around scaling their businesses. They're different issues than the more mature companies that I had been working with before, but working really closely with founders and founding teams in early stage companies. Um, the risk profile is different, the challenges are different, but it is another inflection point in my career.
Yeah, and I look at the company size in terms of all the different companies that you just mentioned, right? So between Genentech and Novartis, obviously, vast differences between the way that the structure of those two large companies, I'm sure work, and then on the other side, the very small company, that's trying to find somebody that is not necessarily um, just fitting one role, but also having, sort of broad experience that fit a lot of different, sort of hats that they need and skills that they need at that point in time. Probably a very sort of vast array that you're having to work within and think through as well.
Yeah. And There's one other inflection point that I really should mention that because it is actually quite pivotal for me and probably for many in your audience as well, and that was the pandemic.
Mm,
Um, and for me at the time, I was leading a talent acquisition for a hospital, which was already um, in crisis, really, around staffing. And then the pandemic hit, and that just took most of America's hospitals or hospitals around the world to the breaking point. But not only from that organizational perspective did was it an inflection point, but also personally, where I knew, and at one point I was counting, and I stopped counting at double digits, where there were double digit people that I knew um, that had died from the COVID, and then it almost an equal number, well, probably more, but over double digits who had gotten infected and recovered.
mm,
And just witnessing the disparate treatment of many people in my community also made my work um, uh, more sort of personal for me, and also really sort of changed my perspective on
mhm.
what I did. And I started looking with a real health equity lens at the work that I did as well.
And I feel like the pandemic pointed out a lot of different things in terms of health equity. One being, not every kid has Wi-Fi at home. Um, that one really stood out to me, which, wasn't much of a mystery to me that, not every kid would have Wi-Fi at home, but there were, I felt like a lot of surprises that came along with COVID. Um, in that path, were there things that also helped that you faced that helped to shape you sort of your approach, in how you approach things?
I mean, absolutely, absolutely. There's one that really is very personal to me. I had a cousin in the Midwest. I'll anonymize this as much as possible. Who was early 50s, um, got COVID, had very severe symptoms, and was hospitalized on a respirator. And this was at the time where, the um, equipment was there was in short supply, and the facility needed to make a decision about whether to keep him on the respirator or to give the equipment to somebody that they felt had a better chance. And they decided to take him off of the respirator.
Mm,
Um, and it is heartbreaking to be so powerless, not to have any impact on that decision, for someone to make a value judgment about his life and say that someone else, who quite frankly was as on the same level of acuity, um, the same, but younger and a different race, which you can't help but think might factor in. Um, and then for them to make that decision that that life was more valuable. So yes, that impacts the way that I work and the way and the lens that I look through, um, as well now, because we have to really address biases and ethics, and that's a lens that I look through as well.
yeah, it's interesting. So that one of the next topics that we will cover as a podcast focuses in on the sort of the shortages that we faced through the pandemic and how um, we need to reinforce just the way that America thinks about the things that we build here locally.
Absolutely.
And typically I go live on Thursday mornings. Unfortunately, I'm traveling at that point in time, but I will have the episode up on Friday for people to be able to watch. But it's one of those things where I just don't think, one, that a lot of people know about how personal that impact could be. And I certainly am empathetic for your family member as well, and that that would happen to anybody, right? I mean, you have this life-saving piece of equipment that you have to have,
Yes.
and somebody's just going to say, "Oh, I'm going to make a switch," and then you think about the talent that you're bringing to sort of the forefront, and the impact that that could have in terms of, okay, so how do I just make sure that the best people and the best minds are always there, and diversely thinking about, I guess, more broadly about the impact, and whether the decision would have been made the same or not, we don't know. But I mean, at the same time, like you said, there could have been a lot of factors, and maybe everybody in the room, just was all of the same mind, and didn't necessarily have that ability to have, multiple voices saying, "Hey, wait a minute, there's
Right.
another way to think about this problem."
Right, right, right. You don't know, but there was the data told a story. The other thing is that out of this, and I think it became really much more of a focus after the pandemic was really um, diversity in clinical trials. Like, are these drugs being tested on uh, underrepresented populations? Um, and so that we understand the impact, right? And are they being tested on women? Are they being tested on people of color, different demographics? um, the drugs and the equipment. And it just, one of the issues was arose with the oximeters, where the oximeters were reading, black people's uh, oxygen levels in a range that was normal, but it's a different range, and it was actually abnormal, and people were suffering. So part of my mission is to make sure that people are aware of these disparities. And every time I see a clinician, and every time they put an oximeter on my finger, I ask them if they know that the scale is different for Black people, that the equipment reads differently for Black people. And I will tell you, 95, maybe even 99% of the time, they're not aware.
Mm.
So if I just can make people aware, just even through my own experience and treatment, then I will feel like I have made a difference.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I mean, I can remember a recent article about that very topic as well, and I remember, um, just kind of being surprised as well. But at the same time, it's reading, light through your finger. So I'm not, not very surprised, but at the same time, and I'm simplifying the technology for anybody that does know it. But I mean, I, certainly can understand exactly what it's trying to do in terms of, measuring your pulse oximetry. And one of the, um, sort of differentiating factors you could understand could be, the, sort of the skin color and things like that. But also, I would say the same thing as you go through the, older part of the population as well. That similar sort of things start to surface as well. That, maybe there needs to be a consideration for, a lot of different factors, not just race, but also, is your age something that's impacting it? Maybe the way that you care for your fingernails has something to do with it. I have no idea what the scientists are going to have to think about, but I sort of, agree with you that, this idea of just making sure that we've considered all the factors are so important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, even, it seems like a no-brainer that you would make sure that there are enough women included in clinical trials. And I think, it's only been, I think, 30 years since it was required that women be included in clinical trials. And now that it's widely accepted that women should be included, 50% of the population should be included in clinical trials, the data isn't always disaggregated. So, what good is it if you have women included in clinical trials, but you don't know who the women are and what the impact of this particular therapy is on the women as opposed to the men? So, we need to really keep talking through it and keep pushing to make sure that we are asking the right questions, we're including the right people, we're looking at the data the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. So could you describe your current role at DHR Global and sort of what does a day in the life of a partner look like for you focused on life sciences and healthcare?
Yeah, yeah. Right now I feel like it's the best job in the world. So I work with um, so I have 160 colleagues across the globe that are partners at DHR Global in about 55 offices in 20 countries. Um, my specific zone of genius is life sciences and healthcare, um, diversity, CEO, and board. Those are the practices that I'm in. But I have colleagues that I work with in different industries and different functional areas like HR or CFO. And so I partner with my colleagues to deliver the best team to solve companies' talent solutions. Now, my zone of genius, like I said, is life sciences and healthcare. So I'm interacting often with those companies um, and and working across the spectrum in terms of maturity. So I recently started working with a lot more early stage companies, but I still work with companies that are mature as well. And I spend my time talking to leaders at these companies about the challenges that they're having, and we talk about things like diversity in clinical trials or health equity issues or things that you might not think of because each of those things have talent ramifications. And I am a resource to solve a problem, not just to fill a hole, not just to fill a seat, not just to say, okay, well, this is, the solution has already been determined, but really to help be a thought partner to solve the problem. And so that looks like me. I get involved in pitch competitions. I do advisory work in incubators and accelerators. I invest myself, and so I'm part of due diligence processes. And all of that um, uh, helps me be a better talent advisor. Um, One could say it's all business development, um, but like I said, I think of myself as a problem solver, so I need to be where the problems are.
Yeah, and I think I think as well, that the understanding the perspective that your clients are coming to you with, probably affords you, some great advantages as well. When you think about including, the scope of diversity in roles like executive level or board level roles, how do you sort of think about that, and what do you discuss to sort of bring to light that the perspective that people should be taking is really one that brings the best minds into the room?
Yeah, absolutely. So, really, we're having a conversation about what your goal is, what your challenge is. Um, and so, a hypothetical example, you're starting a digital health company um, focused on menopause, which is a really hot topic. Um, and you want to hire a chief technology officer, right? You come to me and say, I need a chief technology officer. And so there's so many things to unpack, right? What is, who are you as a founder? If Don Davis is starting the company, I'm going to say, Don, how much do you know about menopause? And you could have your PhD in menopause. I don't even know if that's a thing, but you might want to have somebody in your leadership team with some lived experience. So I might recommend that you think about hiring some women. Um, how about so you say you need a chief technology officer, but where are you in your life cycle? And do you really need a chief technology officer, or do you need to hire someone like if you had a product or something like that? Because people often go to, I need this,
Hmm.
when that might not really be what they need. if you look at what the skill sets and the experiences and the expectations of someone with that title. Is that really what you need? And we have to have all of these conversations. Are you looking at building a team onshore or offshore? Um, and there are elements in there that that are what traditionally would be considered diversity. But really, what it is what is the best solution for the challenge that you're facing, or the goal that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and one of the things that this goes back to for me is that a lot of times, broadly consulting in operational excellence, I sort of wind up going down this path of roles and responsibilities of people. And, I hear these conversations about, who organizations would like to hire and the fact that they want a specific role. And I sort of, ask these questions about what skills do you have, where are those skills gaps? Because that more or
Absolutely.
less leads you back to the same conversation that you're alluding to, is that it's not about the title. It's more about, what skills do you need, and do you need somebody that has that title right now, or do you need somebody that has a broad level of skills that then eventually could grow into that title?
Absolutely. And then even in considering skills, do you need someone who's with learned experience or lived experience? You have
Mm.
to think about how people acquire these skills, because that's important to consider in your matrix.
Yeah, yeah, it's an important distinction as well. Book smarts only get you so far, because it's living off the back of somebody else's experience, and then you still have to get in the world eventually. As you make it through your education, to experiencing these things yourself, and then that will build a whole nother level of skills.
Yeah, there was a quote that I'm going to attribute to Jeff Kaufman, who started Kaufman Fellows. And I really hope that this is his quote, but I'm going to attribute it to him today. And he said that the world's most pressing problems need to be solved by the people who experience them.
Mm.
And it is profound to me, because if you think about engineers and developers and other really smart, really talented people trying to solve problems that they have no experience with, and not including or involving the people who do, um, we get really good stuff that doesn't have any impact.
Right. Right. Which, I mean, I think is one of the main cautions that a lot of people have about AI as well, is that, if you're not sort of watching and guiding the things that are coming out of AI, then, the reality is that, you could wind up with something that doesn't necessarily represent, what you wanted or needed. And that's that. I mean, I think that falls directly in line with that same exact quote.
Absolutely.
So, whenever you think about DHR's, the work that you do there, um, in you sort of look at the broader landscape of life sciences. How do you, sort of interact with companies? How do companies get started with DHR?
Well, typically the way that they engage with me is through one of these programs, um, or initiatives. That's really how I interact with a lot of people, where people are talking about their challenges, and I'll say, hey, I can help you with that. I can help you think through that. Whether it's, how do I structure my board? How do I incentivize my board? How do I um, how do I make sure that my board stays engaged and we're pushing towards the same thing? Um, you know, it could come out of those conversations. I consider myself to be fairly active on LinkedIn, and so I may write something or have a conversation such as this, where people say, you know what? Let me call Andrea and see what she thinks about this. Um, or, they could come across, our website, and not even be looking for me specifically, but, looking for a consultant in the practice. Um, again, we're at a really interesting point right now. Healthcare services are is facing a talent crisis. Um, Life sciences, there is a war for talent. Um, you know, we're not attracting uh, young people into the field like we at the rate that we need to. And then so many clinicians are choosing alternate career paths. And, um, I said, by the time I get old, which is going to be a couple of decades, but by the time that I get old, there's going to be nobody to treat me because all the doctors are going to be on TikTok. so, um,
Well, at least you'll know. At least you'll know them then.
I may know them, but they might not be able to help me. Is the
Right.
problem.
Right.
um, so we really have to rethink how we, engage talent from early to filling the pipeline to at the senior levels, so that they're not burnt out and frustrated and leaving early, because we need people to continue to work on these problems.
Yeah, I had a doctor's appointment earlier today, and interestingly enough, the individual that we interacted with was probably the most personable doctor I've had in decades. And and I remember, I walked out and I said to my wife, I said, this guy definitely wound up in the right field for him. He seems to love his job in terms of caring for people, but also, on the opposite end, the patients, from a patient perspective, it is a great interaction as well. And so you know, there are a lot of people that I feel like should be weeded out, maybe, and go find a TikTok job or some other thing to maybe give them a little bit more personality. But at the same time, I mean, if you have great personality, hopefully you continue to find the challenge inside of healthcare, and that you stay with you know life sciences or healthcare, whichever field that you've studied.
Absolutely. On the flip side of that, my mom was in rehab. She's in rehab now, but recently when she was in rehab, I was visiting, and this machine approached me, and a voice came out of the machine, and it said, "Would you mind opening the door for me?" And I said, "Are you talking to me?" And the voice said, "Yes, I'm talking to you." And then I looked at the machine, and there was a picture of a man, and it said Dr. So and so. And I said, "Well, you're my mom's doctor." And who's your mother? I told, "Oh, I was just visiting with your mother." So you're not coming in to see her. You're
Via the machine.
rolling around. Yeah, yeah. And there's some patients that I feel like are really a challenge for telemedicine. Lovely personality, very, very personable for somebody who's in a box with a machine. But I'm concerned about the his ability to really care for my mother in a machine.
Mm. Yeah, I
So
could understand that.
yeah. And so how personality and technology, we have to figure out a really good balance.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is a future for telemedicine, but at the same time, like you said, it has to be the right fit at the right time. And whether it's for all people and rolling around on wheels with a screen. I keep thinking back to the Big Bang theory because Sheldon Cooper built the I forget what he called it, like a physical presence device or something like that, in the show. But yeah, similar sort of story. I want to focus a little bit on you now. So, how would you describe your leadership style?
Collaborative. I am, I would say, visionary, um, empowering. That's how I would describe it.
Very good. And then, what's the greatest piece of leadership advice that you've ever received, and how's it influenced your career?
Gosh, you know, I recently attended a conference, the Healthcare Businesswomen's Association annual conference, and the keynote speaker was Carla Harris, and she has these 8 pearls of wisdom. Um, and those pearls, I would say, are what has resonated with me most recently. Um, and I can't remember all of them right now, but I do remember thinking that they're framed so that you're extremely intentional about your how you show up, how you engage, um, and and the impact that you have. And I feel like so many people are really focused on moving through an organization or focused on a title, um, that they're not as intentional. Uh, and I know that I endeavor to be extremely intentional, and even more so now than I was earlier in my career. So I think, you know, the best advice is intentional. And if anybody has the opportunity to read Carla Harris's, she has 3 books, all are fantastic. But you know, if you look at the 8 Pearls of Wisdom, I highly recommend that.
Yes, I just Googled it really quickly for anybody that's watching or listening, but their authenticity, build trust, create clarity, create other leaders, diversity, innovation, inclusivity, and then your voice. I mean, I don't know which ones necessarily resonate with you, but I just tried to pull it up in support of you here as well. That I know what it's like to be on the spot as well, and you're trying to remember even something that's central to you. And yeah, so I mean, I'll make sure that that I include some sort of a link back to these for anybody that's referencing it later.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, there are 3 questions that I like to ask every guest. What inspires you?
Inspired by a the potential of a future that is more equitable.
Mm. And what does that mean to you?
That means that everyone has the opportunity to self actualize, to live their best lives, as the young people say. That's healthy, um, wealthy, which could be financial, but has a much broader implication, and wise, in terms of, you know, intellectual abilities and challenges.
What concerns you?
It concerns me that we might not get there in my lifetime.
Mm. And when you think about the barriers to get there, are there any major concerns that you have?
Well, I think education is a great equalizer, and to the extent that we limit access to quality education for everyone, that's a huge barrier. Um, I think we need to have really honest dialogue, um, knowing where we've been, so that we can craft where we're going, is important. And when we limit our abilities to have that dialogue, and we limit our abilities to understand where we've been, I think that's an obstacle.
Thank you for that. And what excites you?
What excites me is the number of ways that I have to impact this future that I want to see. Most people say, oh, well, you work in diversity, so you can work to diversify corporate America. And that is one way. But it's not the only way that I have to impact. You know, diversifying the C-suite, diversifying boardrooms, but also supporting diverse founders, um, and helping them realize their vision, for the future, seeing products and services come to the market that were previously not valued, investing and using my time, talents, and treasures to support that future. And there's so many ways to do that, and I'm so happy and feel so fortunate to be able to have found multiple ways to make that happen.
Well, Andrea Henderson, thank you so much for being on the Life Science Success podcast. I really appreciate you being here and for sharing all your thoughts with us about, how we might sort of think about the future and the talent, that we involve in the organizations that we're building.
Thank you so much for having me. And it goes without saying that if any one of your listeners or viewers has any challenges that they want to discuss, feel free to reach out.
Thanks so much.